For this assignment, you're going to be creating a self-portrait print, and the idea is that you're making a drawing that is coming from a photograph of yourself. So you'll have the option to have your photograph taken in class, or you can take your picture at home, like on a cell phone camera, and then email it to me to print out. You get to decide what expression you make on your face. You get to decide if you want to put a filter on it if you're using a cell phone, and then send it to me with whatever filter you want to work with. But to begin with, we're going to be designing the background behind the portrait, and that's also going to be made from a stamp that you're going to carve out and then print around the portrait. So to begin with, we need to design what the pattern is going to become in the background of your portrait assignment. So you're going to see this worksheet where you've got spaces to plan out lots of ideas. So here's my beginning ideas of where I started. The idea is that you are going to be carving a stamp based upon one of these design ideas that you brainstorm. So what you need to remember is that when you carve a stamp, it's difficult to get small detail lines carved into the stamp. It can be tricky to do a lot of round lines in carving. It is much easier to carve straight lines, so you might think about that as you're designing the stamp. And you don't want your lines super close together because you'll have a difficult time carving those as well. So to get started, if you'll notice on the worksheet, there is one box that has the letter F printed at the top. The F stands for front. So what I want you to do is draw your first design in this box. So when I started out for the one that became my stamp, this is where I began. And I knew that when I rotate my stamp to make sets of 4 or rows across in the background, I want the design to connect in the middle. So when you do this, it's best to draw your lines from the side edges of the box or your lines coming out from the corner of this block of 4. So when I did this, I started out in the corner first, and then I drew 2 lines that were representing the area that I'm going to be carving away. So in between these 2 lines is what I'm going to be taking off the stamp, and you can see that's what I've done here. Then my lines kind of extended diagonally this way, but I thickened up the line again. So instead of just leaving it one skinny line, I drew another edge next to it, and this was representing all the area that I'm going to be carving out off my stamp. Then I drew these lines coming out from the edge here, and then I drew this triangle shape coming from the middle. So that's where this design began. When you look at your image, you want to make sure that there's equal amounts of negative space and positive shape. So if you can imagine, this is what's getting carved away. I had equal amounts of like high spots, low spots on my stamp. You don't want to have too many of one or the other because then your stamp is going to be really complicated to print with. But once you've got your beginning design drawn out, then what you're going to use is tracing paper to use a copy to print the other 3 sections around the first one that you drew. So when I do this, I'm going to take my tracing paper and I'm going to put it off in the corner because you should be able to trace 3 different designs on one piece of tracing paper, and these 3 designs came from this section over here. So I don't want to put it right in the center of my tracing paper because I'm not going to be able to fit the other 2 boxes. So off on an edge. What I'm going to do is work with pencil only. This does not work with pen, but I'm going to trace the box to begin with, and I want to use really firm hand pressure when I do my tracing. And I'm even going to trace the letter F, which is telling me this is the front of my stamp, because this will be helpful as we proceed. And then I'm going to trace all the rest of the pencil lines. Okay. If you make a mistake, you can just erase it. Now, the way that you get this to print is you have to turn this over and put pencil on the back side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a piece of scrap paper for my art folder, and I'm going to turn this print over so it's backwards, and then I have to trace it again. I don't need to worry about tracing the outside square on this second one, but I do want to be very precise when I put the pencil on the back of the design, and I want to press as hard as I can so that I get really deep, dark pencil on this back copy. Okay, when I finish, I'm going to get rid of that scrap paper, and now I'm going to line it back up so that it matched my original design, and the letter F is on top. F is standing for front. So what I'm going to do is see what happens when I rotate my stamp. So I'm going to turn it a quarter turn. I'm going to line it back up on the box underneath, and I'm going to trace it again. This time when I trace, the pencil is coming off the back of the tracing paper, and it's going to leave a print on the worksheet underneath. But this is only going to work if you put pencil on the back side and if you are precise when you trace. So now you can see that it made a really, really light copy, but it's dark enough that I can see this to know where to outline to kind of bring that design back to the surface. If nothing printed, it's because you forgot to put pencil on the back side, or you didn't press hard enough, or you weren't tracing exactly on the line. So now I'm going to repeat that in this section. I have the S on top, meaning front. So now I'm going to turn it another quarter turn. I'm going to line up the square, and I'm going to trace these lines, and it's going to make a print underneath. So I want you to come up with 3 different images that you're going to practice with, and you can decide how you want to print them. If you want to do the quarter turn option, or perhaps you don't do the quarter turn option and you come up with another method. The important thing to remember though is that when you do your printing, you need to have the letter F on top as you print, because remember this is going to be a stamp. So my only options when I stamp is to hold it steady, stamp, stamp, so I could do rows of the exact same position, or I could turn it upside down where I might have a row in this position and then turn it in a row in this position, or I could do the quarter turn where I stamp, 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 stamp. So I want you to come up with 3 different options. Your worksheet is double-sided. Actually, that one's not showing it. But your worksheet will be double-sided so that you can practice on, here we go, so it's double-sided so that you can have 6 spots to practice different placements where you might like one design that you drew, but you want to try different methods of how you go about printing it. And this is a 20-point assignment where you do have to come up with 3 different designs to get full credit for this assignment before we then move on to carving out your stamps.